A coffee shop is one of the most deceptive small businesses in America, not because the coffee is bad or the owners are careless, but because the entire model is built on a margin illusion that hides real fragility underneath. On paper, coffee looks like one of the best products a person could sell. The core input, roasted beans and milk, costs pennies compared to the price on the menu, which is exactly why so many people convince themselves that opening a coffee shop is a low-risk way into entrepreneurship. The truth only becomes visible once you look past the cup and into the full cost structure sitting behind it. Start with the real estate, because a coffee shop does not choose its location the way most businesses do. It needs visibility, walkability, and morning foot traffic, which means it is almost always competing for the most expensive square footage on the block. Landlords know this, and they price accordingly, often charging coffee shops a premium specifically because a bright, active cafe makes the entire street feel more valuable. The owner ends up paying rent not just for their own space, but for the atmosphere they generate for every neighboring business, an invisible tax baked directly into the lease. Then there is equipment, which most first-time owners dramatically underestimate. A commercial-grade espresso machine alone can cost tens of thousands of dollars, and that is before grinders, brewers, refrigeration, POS systems, furniture, and the build-out required to meet health and safety codes. Total startup costs for even a modest shop often land somewhere between $150,000 and $350,000, all spent before a single drink is sold. This is capital that sits on the books as pure risk, waiting to be earned back one small transaction at a time. That is where the real math problem begins. A coffee shop's average ticket size is small, typically somewhere between $4 and $7, which means unlike a restaurant that can recover its costs through a handful of high-value dinners, a coffee shop needs an enormous volume of transactions just to stay afloat. Hundreds of purchases a day, every day, are required to cover fixed costs like rent, insurance, and equipment financing, and there is very little room for a slow month before the entire structure starts to strain. Labor compounds this problem in a way that is easy to overlook. A coffee shop has to be staffed for its entire operating window, from the early morning rush through the slow midday lull, because customers expect a barista behind the counter the moment the doors open. This means labor costs as a share of revenue tend to run higher for coffee shops than for many restaurants, often landing between 28% and 35%. Because there is no way to concentrate staffing around a single profitable rush the way a dinner-focused restaurant can. This is where the 80 to 90% gross margin on a single espresso drink becomes almost meaningless in isolation. That number only describes the relationship between the cost of beans and milk and the price of the cup. It says nothing about rent, labor, spoilage, equipment depreciation, or the slow Tuesday in February that quietly erases the profit from 3 good Saturdays. Milk expires, pastries go stale, machines break at the worst possible moment. None of these costs show up in the marketing math that makes coffee look like a guaranteed win, but all of them show up on the bank statement. Zoom out far enough, and a coffee shop stops looking like a beverage business and starts looking like a logistics and real estate operation that happens to use coffee as its interface with customers. The owner is really managing perishable inventory, staffing across long, low-traffic hours, and a lease priced for visibility rather than affordability, all while relying on razor-thin per-transaction profit to eventually outpace a large upfront capital investment. None of this means coffee shops are destined to fail. Many succeed, particularly when the owner treats the business from day one as a volume and operations challenge rather than a lifestyle dream, and prices staffing, sourcing, and lease terms with that discipline in mind. But the gap between the fantasy of owning a cozy neighborhood coffee shop and the arithmetic required to keep one alive is exactly why so many close within their first few years. It was never really about whether people loved the coffee. It was about whether the business behind the coffee could survive on the numbers it was actually built on.